Aloha, friends and family. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast. I have with me this week a dear friend of mine, Ryan McKinney of McKinney Coaching and Consulting, here to talk about energy leadership, the pitfalls behind energy leadership, how our busyness and overthinking can be our best distractions from living a life that we truly love and enjoy. So thank you so much for being with me today, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'm so excited to have you on the show today. So many of you heard just before the show, as I read Ryan's bio, he has experience in both corporate, supporting busy professionals, both men and women, entrepreneurs and executives, into leading a more fulfilling life, to through your four-step, I guess, the four blocks that you see most of the time, which I'm going to invite you to share about. You have the Leads Academy and also host men's retreats. So tell us a little bit about how you evolved into supporting busy professionals.
Well, they say the way you evolve into that is you probably were one before, which I was. And I spent 20 years working in corporate America, 10 of that in the financial services sector, and then 10 of which were in durable goods and working as a strategic planner and operations planner for manufacturing companies to help the sales side of the world talk with the operations side, which usually doesn't happen very well. And you can imagine the amount of busyness that I came across in all of that. And I was really good at it too, by the way.
So what was that moment in that 20-year career where you were just like, this isn't working anymore?
Well, that was probably a bit of a process as it happened. But the moment that I decided that I was going to work for myself and be a coach happened about 5 years ago. When I took the leap to actually do it was about a year and a half ago. I was working for another company, flying back and forth to Utah, spending lots of time away from family, helping this company to stand itself up and do the right thing. And they were going through some pandemic surges and ended up with some pandemic deserts in their world and end up cutting 70% of their workforce. Good news is I had a coaching certificate, coaching certification, and gosh, I can't even talk. And had been coaching for 3.5 years on nights and weekends, running retreats and doing all kinds of things. And I just kind of sat there when I got the news in my head, in my hands, and I went, maybe this is it. And I just prayed and I said, God, is this you kicking me out of the nest? I had a plan of working for them for like 3 years, and I had been there for about a year at that point. I got my confirmation in my heart and felt a wash of peace over me. My wife and I put our sharp pencils to a piece of paper and said, let's do it. Now that's the quick and easy version. It was a lot of sleepless nights and headaches and turmoil and arguments and back and forth about that. But as you can imagine, but ultimately the decision was to move forward, running my own coaching and consulting business, and I haven't looked back. It's been ups and downs for sure, but been a blast the whole time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. As I'm hearing you speak, when you look back, as I always believe, like where we are is the vehicle for the next thing. When you look back at that chapter of your life, where you were and what you have stepped into to create and support other professionals in their life, what did you gather as the biggest takeaway that you knew you were here to teach?
It's interesting you asked that question because, you and I've had this conversation too. I've learned a lot of those big takeaways afterwards doing it. What I stepped into coaching full time and was working with people was to help them find their purpose and to find what lit them up in their life. There was a lot of vision planning, kind of clarity around that, really about gaining clarity about where your impact and purpose was. That's what I was stepping out into and truly enjoyed it. Since then, I've learned that one of the biggest competitors against that in our life is our busyness, staying busy. And you and I had a conversation about that, and just quick share on that. Jen was like, hey, one of the things that I've noticed is that when there's busyness present, that it can be a need for significance in something. And I was like, on my face, I was like, yeah, I've heard that too. And then when we got off our call, it just rolled around in my brain for days. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I actually practiced pulling away from some of the busyness things that I was doing in my business. And it gave me a lot of clarity on and focus around what truly matters and what meant the most. So there's a lot of things that I've learned. So kind of a loaded question. Before I left corporate and leaving corporate, I had one thing in mind. And now since then, there's a handful of things that I help people with, but one of them is busyness.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that busyness equals significance. I think I even did a podcast episode on that. And certainly a lot of the women that I serve can relate to busyness equals importance. And then I heard you say on the other side of that, when we let go of busyness, there's clarity. And I really just want to reflect back to you that I loved that you kind of painted that full picture, because if we're in the cycle of busyness, we're not actually creating space for clarity. We're just like, it's like we just keep throwing ingredients in the bowl or filling the drawers with clothes. And then we don't even, we're just kind of taking care of the problems that are on top versus what is really underneath. And also what I know about you is that your style of coaching, and one of the reasons that we connected is because of your I guess learning or certification through energy leadership. And so talk to me a little bit about busyness on one hand, and how the tools and techniques of energy leadership help to bring us more into alignment versus sort of living and surviving in busyness and chaos and overthinking and doubt and things like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And energy leadership developed by Bruce D. Snyder and taught through his coaching certification company, IPEC, or Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. I think I've covered all my bases and given credit now. Energy leadership is a fantastic framework for essentially the way we show up. And without giving you all the details of what makes up energy leadership and the framework itself, it essentially focuses on two types of energy, and it can get a little more detailed than that with 7 levels broken up in that. But the two types are catabolic energy and anabolic energy. Those terms borrowed from biology and chemistry around how cells operate with each other. And catabolic energy essentially is a tearing down destructive force or energy. We most closely associate that with fight or flight type of energy. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. The anabolic side is more around productivity, satisfaction, gratitude, joy, embodiment, synergy, just being and enjoying the being part of who you are. It's growing, healing, restorative type of energy. And many people will say, well, one's bad, one's good. And what energy leadership teaches is that neither are bad or good, but only when they are done in default. We are not thinking or consciously applying the type of energy we want in a situation. And the other one is when we have misplaced the type of energy that we're bringing. We should say should, but ultimately the energy calls for a certain type of healing and restorative energy. But because we have given our responses over to subconscious or non-conscious is what I like to call it, we end up in default of fight or flight in a certain situation. So let me give an example, because that's a bunch of words at one time. For my corporate clients, a lot of times I will say, hey, we've become addicted to stress energy. And we become addicted to this catabolic type of energy. And they kind of look at me with confused looks. And I'll say, well, let me give you an example. And I say, how many of you have goals that you were given to you by your company to hit by the end of December? And they all raise their hand. And I say, how many of you have backed those goals up to September or October? And they all raised their hand. And I said, you've become addicted to stress. You've essentially applied a new deadline to yourself because you know that under stress you will produce. That's okay if you know you're doing that, but you need to also recognize that that comes at a cost. Fight or flight energy is high cost, short term, and anabolic energy is lower costs and actually restorative and longer term. And it helps people to understand that there's a benefit to shifting away, or at least becoming conscientious of the type of energy that they bring.
It sounds to me, when I hear you speak, it's like that, the idea of, I always speak in terms of expansion and contraction, and just really understanding that actually sometimes the contraction, which in your case might be catabolic, is where the growth actually occurs. It's actually the expansion, which is why both of them are necessary, that we're all in a cycle of just, it's really about noticing and then choosing in that moment to shift so that we can sort of step out of our survivor strategies. And I like to use the words, instead of trigger, activate. So triggering could create like indecision or procrastination, whereas an activation would be like noticing you're in survivor mode and then choosing differently and stepping into more that anabolic energetic state. And as I hear you speak, like, this seems to be like a little secret that can help to create work-life balance, whether you're in working corporate or whether you're owning your own business. Would you be willing to share a little bit about the 7 levels of energy leadership, just because I'd like to place the link for those in the show notes, and just, we don't have to go into depth unless the conversation goes there, but just, I didn't ask those for you ahead of time. Do you know them? Are you able to share?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So they go. So one of the things I need to say about the levels 1 through 7, yes, they count up. They also count down. It's not about moving. The numbers are more of they're labels than they are desired levels. In any situation, you may choose a different level to bring to that particular situation. And the energy that we bring, let me back up for a second. The energy that we bring affects our thoughts and beliefs about a situation, affects our emotions and feelings, ultimately affects our actions and the way that we present ourselves and show up in the world. So that's why energy is so important, because it controls that piece of it. And if we have given our control of energy over to our subconscious, because what worked in a very stressful situation before will now also work here, then we're using that without conscious thought. The concept behind the levels of energy are that catabolic and anabolic are the two big things to remember. But levels 1 and level 2 are catabolic, fully catabolic. Level 1 is victim energy. It's the overwhelmed, it's things are happening to me, it's flight energy. It's where overthinking lives. It is a situation happens and you replay the events over and over in your mind, wishing you had acted differently. That's level 1 energy. It is the world crashing in on you. Nothing belongs to you. And it's got advantages and disadvantages. Advantages are, people can, it garners support from other people when we need it most. Where it might be appropriate is if someone has passed and there's a lot of sadness or grief. That level 1 energy can let people know we need them to put their arm around us. We need support from other humans. Where it is not good is, or it is not productive, is when you might be in a board meeting and somebody slams their fist on the table and says, this better get done by 5 on Friday. And everybody just kind of looks down at their notes and doesn't say anything, and kind of sheeps back and just says, man, I wish I would have spoken up, because there's no way this could be done by Friday. We're going to fail. That's when it doesn't work. And I won't give that in depth on each one of them, but just to let you know, that's how deep it can go, and even deeper. Level 2 is conflict energy. It's fight energy. It is blaming other people energy. And even if you blame society, situations, whatever, any person for something that happens, you are experiencing level 2 energy. Level 2 is from a win-lose kind of place. It's like, hey, I'm going to win this race, even if I got to trip you to get there. And both of those are fully catabolic. Level 3 is the step above and out of catabolic energy. There's a little bit of catabolic there, and that's the part where you said contracting can sometimes be productive, because level 3 is also kind of the get stuff done level of energy. This is where we're going to stay focused on a goal, maybe able to cope at level 3. This is when you hear somebody say, yes, I know this is a bad situation that we've got, but if we just stay focused, we can still make it through this. That's that kind of level 3 energy. Level 3 is, you will see, by the way, corporate America is pretty much level 1 and 2. You will see leaders that move quickly up in the ladder have learned how to jump into level 3. So they're able to stay catabolic, but at the same time, bring an anabolic viewpoint to things. And that's kind of where you see the corporate usually doesn't get into level 4, 5, and 6, and you'll see why in a minute. Level 4 is like servant leader energy. It is the core thought here is concern, core feeling is compassion, the core act or the way we show up is in service of others. This comes from a lose-win frame of mind. I want to make sure you win even if I lose. And that's okay. It's out of service to others. Sometimes the challenge here is that people get kind of mixed boundaries or smudged boundaries, and they may take on too many things. Interesting thing about level 4 is it has a dark relationship with level 1. A lot of times our servant leaders will go and say, I went and did all this extra work. And then if we get discounted or dismissed in any way, we go, oh my gosh, how could they not see that I did all this? And you start, oh my, I did everything for them. And here I am stuck with this. How could this happen?
Sort of like the martyr, like a martyr.
Yeah.
Yeah. The hero
Exactly.
martyr.
Quickly go from level 4 to level 1. And that can happen. Level 4 is very selfless. Level 5 is the land of opportunity. That's what I nicknamed it. But we see opportunities everywhere at level 5. This is even when something bad happens, we go, there's an opportunity here. And I always use kind of the things, hey, somebody backed into my mailbox. Well, that's the opportunity is as an entrepreneur, I could create a mailbox that if somebody backed into it, it wouldn't get knocked over. Like that's the kind of mindset. People just see opportunity in everything. The challenges here is that people can get into paralysis by analysis and slip into that level 1 overthinking before you know it, because like so many opportunities, I don't know where to start. They get overwhelmed by the good things going on. Level 6 is being in the flow. This is that intuitive style energy that's just, you just kind of know things are coming together. You can see the bigger picture and how all the things fit, even if they are referred to as bad or good by other people. You kind of see them as just connected and sometimes necessary, even if it may have a consequence people don't prefer. That's at level 6 energy. And level 7 is they call it I am energy. It's the being type of energy. This is full passion, fully creative, completely objective thinking. Nothing is taken personally. We're all part of one another. We co-create our experiences in life, and we are fully conscious of how we show up. This is the level of manifestation from the standpoint where you say, that's not how I'm going to show up. So I'm choosing to bring this energy. And before you know it, the manifestation brings itself out and manifests. But that's it in a nutshell, a very quick and dirty nutshell.
Thank you for sharing that. As you were going through the different levels, I was like, yes, yes, yes. I see myself in all of those levels. And of course, the goal is to be 4, 5, 6, 7 most of the time, right?
The higher so there's the way they pulled this together, there's an energy leadership index assessment. And when you take this assessment, it gives you a number that correlates to success, and there's a high correlation with mathematically, statistically speaking. They've done all the work to do that, and I can give you a white paper on that that'll share that with you. But if anybody's a math nerd that wants that, let me know. But
Me, I'm a
ultimately,
total math nerd right here.
so I'll get you a copy for sure. But the thing about that is the higher the number on this scale that comes out of this energy leadership index, the more closely associated with satisfaction in life that it is. And it doesn't mean that you want to be 6 or be 7. It means that when you view the world mostly through that lens, that you have the ability to use the others at will. And essentially level 7 leaders, they use the other energy levels at will to co-create their life.
Have you met somebody who really embodies level 7 energy?
You know, they even say this in a lot of the literature, is that nobody resonates there fully.
Right.
It's I have done literally hundreds and hundreds of these assessments, and the highest number that I think I've seen, and I don't want to give anybody, a number to try to achieve or whatever, but the highest number that I think I've seen out of that is somewhere around the high 4s. I don't even think I've seen one in the 5s. And that's
Wow.
the way it's calculated is it's essentially the way they've calculated to make sure that it correlates is you're not going to find a bunch of 6s or 7s.
Right.
It's really somebody that sits in that area, because they're not going to get a lot of stuff done either, by the way.
It might be like
remember
a
you talk about
Buddhist.
expanding and contracting.
Yeah. It might be like a Buddhist monk or something.
Exactly. And they're not too many of them are taking the ELI.
No, they don't need that validation probably in that moment.
That's right.
So what tools or techniques do you use to get yourself out of 1 or 2 when you notice yourself, or maybe even 3? Like, what is your go-to? Take us through that process.
Yeah. So I usually start with let me just say, just like everybody else that would use this type of framework. So all experience levels 1 through 7 on a daily basis. It's normal. It's natural. We all tend to have this is measured in the ELI as well. We all have an energetic profile, which is what I call our walking around energy. This is just you on any given day. And then there is your energetic stress reaction. And what that is when stress is introduced, any type of stress, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever, then you respond with a different profile. You have a completely different energy when stress is introduced. And what I work with people is and I'll answer your question in just a second, but what I work with people on is to raise the energy level in their walking around energy, to decrease the cycle time of subconscious response, that reaction that we're having. And then the third thing is to infuse anabolic energy in stressful situations. So if someone is walking around and they've got a lower level of energy all the time, help them raise that. The other one is if they do get under stress, how do we shorten the amount of time that they're stressed and they can actually respond and do that? That's where the question I'll answer in just a second comes from. And then the third one about that, that bringing anabolic energy into stressful situations. I love asking these questions to people. It's like, hey, what would be different in your life in that stressful situation you just had if you were able to truly see how you could be in service? If you were able to truly see how you could have an opportunity? If you could truly see how everything is connected, what would be different for you in that moment? And that's one way that they can start to embody how that energy leadership can really show up for them. It's like, oh, well, if I was able to be in service when normally I'm shaking my fist at somebody, I could understand that, everybody's walking a different walk and they might have gone through something terrible. How can I be of support of that person as opposed to this? How would that feel if you did that? I think I'd like that. Okay. How do we start to recognize more of that in your life? And that's a lot of where the work goes. to get myself out of it as a person. I'm a human. So, I might be whistling along at level 5 energy, driving down the road and thinking all kinds of opportunistic thoughts, and then somebody cuts me off. And I'm going to drop to level 2 pretty quick because that's my natural response. And I go, first step is like being aware, like just knowing that this framework is there, knowing that this energy leadership scale is there, automatically gives you clarity around, wow, it's no longer I am mad, I'm experiencing anger. So now that I'm experiencing anger, I can recognize it for what it is. It's an emotion, right? And it's born out of angry thoughts. I can then begin to reprogram how I want to respond in that situation, or I might be fully okay with being angry in that moment, and that's okay. My role as an energy leadership coach is not to change how often someone is angry, but if someone doesn't like how often they are angry, to help them understand how to make the changes they want to make, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, I love that you're just inviting us into that conversation of, first of all, what is an emotion, energy in motion? How do we take ownership of our experience by owning that it is just an experience of an emotion versus being the emotion, experience it versus being. And I love everything you shared. It's super awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. We didn't even know the conversation was going to go there. We just let it unfold, however it is, whatever level of leadership that is, somewhere around just trust and intuition. What's coming through for me is, I think, kind of where we started, and knowing who you serve and the work that I do. How can we sort of tie this together? Because I attract high performing, purpose driven women. And so the busyness is a great distraction. It's a survivor strategy. It's really keeping us from the thing we want most. It's keeping us from experiencing life at its best, at its fullest. And yet, culturally, as a former high achieving, high performer myself, I also know that I'm wired like that. Like, I like hard work. I like results. I like to win. I like to achieve. It feels good. And I've done a lot of personal work around, like, well, what does it say about me? What does it not? Who am I really seeking validation from? And so on the other end of the spectrum, I've also created this prosperity course, and it's really about healing your relationship to money. And one of the 6 major blocks that comes up, and there's like the saboteurs in your relationship to money, because what we're doing is we're overworking, we're overachieving, we're overperforming. And when we're wired to perform, it'll never feel like enough. It'll never feel like enough, because once we achieve, we're looking at the next thing. But the biggest block is hard work equals success. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are. How do we navigate if we know that we're wired like I have 2 children, 17 and 14. You have kids. They are who they are. They are born to be who they are. Like, some of it could be learned behavior, but it's pretty innately wired that you're either really driven and in this way, or you're more of a free spirit, or like, yeah, we can say that there's some environmental factors and there's some behavioral things that maybe we've learned, but also part of it is just who we are. And so if you're a person who thrives and you're passionate in your job, in home, you want to do a really good job, how do you navigate that balance between really discerning, like, is this coming from a healthy place or is this coming from a survivor place? That's the first question. And the second question is, what are your thoughts on how do we break that paradigm of hard work equals success once we know what success is for us?
It's a great couple of questions. I think what's coming to mind, first of all, I want to mention one thing about kids and how I know that, just to support what you said, how I know that we are all born to be whom we are born to be. Like, both of my kids grew up in the same household. My wife and I have not changed. They are very different. And yet they're similar in some ways. And I think that learned behavior is where they are similar in some ways. We get compliments all the time. Hey, your kids are polite, they're kind, they do all the things that we've taught them to do. At the same time, my son is a very different human being than my daughter. They just have different characteristics and different traits. And I think that's because they are living out, and they've got a place where they can grow up in an environment, they can grow up and live out who they are. And I think that's super important for us to know that. So there are things that are in us, we're hardwired to do. And I think that that comes back to that performance piece. And knowing that performance is a large part of the culture in which we live in, the society in which we live in today. It's almost like, well, you can't, I can't imagine a place where nobody was focused on performance. Like, I don't want to imagine that place. I love the idea that my business is successful in areas because I performed well in those areas. I love that. And who wouldn't like a great outcome? But what it brings me back to is this concept of mastery versus performance. And it's a kind of a weird thought, but I always think of like a cobbler when I think about this conversation around mastery. It's like, mostly because I don't know a cobbler, probably. And it's a fun word to say, by the way. But this idea of a cobbler, like they work their life to master how to build really nice shoes, beautiful shoes, comfortable shoes, amazing shoes. And they can't do that by going to a class. They do that through daily growing in how they are doing what they're doing. This idea of mastery. I want to become a master cobbler. I want to become a master painter. I want to become a master whatever it is. And that is a long story arc. It's over the course of a lifetime to be considered a master composer, a master, musician, whatever. And that's because there's this constant desire to be better, not from a driven place of proving to someone else, but from a desire to be the best for yourself. That place of drive, I think, is a healthy place, or at least in my opinion, is a healthy place. Performance, and the way I'll use this word right now, and I don't want to make words bad or good, I just using it in this context versus mastery. Performance is really about the act you committed to create the outcome that was desired. And if the desired outcome was one you desired, then you're on the right track. If the outcome you desired was someone else's outcome, and that's where I see this happen a lot in corporate America, busy professional women, professional men, doesn't matter. There is an outcome that is laid out for a team to do without giving context of why it should be important for them, why they should be giving it their all. And ultimately, it's about conquering the next mountain. Not because you want to be a master mountain climber, but because you want to prove to everybody else that you won't die trying. And that will drive you crazy. It will make you restless. It will keep you in busyness. It will keep you from enjoying the walk up that mountain. And it's a beautiful mountain. Nothing wrong with the mountain, nothing wrong with reaching the top. There's also nothing wrong with going for a walk on that mountain. And I think that's the part that we miss. Of course, we want to accomplish things. And I had this, just a quick story on this. I had a situation with my son. He was on a team that he was a soccer player, really good soccer player, like good to maybe not to the level that your daughters are surfers, but he's up there. He's pretty good. Competition level soccer. And he was on a team one year that was just not winning. And like, I normally won't say it's the coaches, but it was a coach that was not doing his job at that time. The kids were getting disheartened. They weren't winning. It was a big, like 30 games, no wins. And so he's just got his head hung low. We're going to, the game. And I was like, what's the matter? He goes, I don't want to go. And I said, how come you don't want to go? And he's like, I mean, we're just going to lose. It's awful. We always lose. We keep losing. And I said, okay. I said, here's the deal. I said, you're going to be on teams sometimes that aren't the winningest team. You're going to be on teams sometimes that do. That's okay. What I want you to focus on today is not whether you win that game or not. And this might rub some parents the wrong way, and that's okay. I don't care. Not whether you win that game or not. Of course you want to win. That's what you're out there to do. You're playing the game because you want to win it. You don't want to go out there and play a game of soccer and lose every time. You want to win. Of course you want to win. But let's look at that as your ideal outcome. Now, let's look out there and say, if you walk off that field, but you still feel good about yourself, no matter what the score is, what would you need to do for that to happen? And he's like, well, if I gave it my best, if I give it everything else out there, I knew I did everything that I could, at least I could walk off with my head high. And I was like, okay. And I said, what about the middle? And he's like, well, if I got a shot on goal and I didn't, make any errors. And I was like, okay, cool. And so about halfway through it, they were still losing, like 3-0. And I looked at him, and the rest of his team got their head hung low. And he looks around at the rest of his team and he's like, guys, get your chin up. Let's go. Let's play this game. And they didn't win, but they tied. And at the end of it, he walked off feeling good, not because they tied, but because he wasn't so focused on the outcome that it was a win or die situation. It was a win or learn. And when we can do that and we can create that type of viewpoint in our life, then we let go of what the outcome is and we can focus on becoming a master. And when we get that mastery energy and we're trying to work on becoming better in every step, pretty soon we'll be unstoppable. And we reach the same goal, but it's a long story arc. It's the anabolic way to approach it as opposed to got to win today. If that makes sense.
I love it. It makes perfect sense. It's like, we hear this a lot, but rather than focusing on the result, focusing on, I just reminded me. So here's my quick little parenting story. I just took my daughter to nationals, and so national championships. She was winning the final seat the whole time. Okay, she's in women's nationals. She's 14 years old. She's winning. There's a minute left. Another girl gets a wave, and so it took the judges about 4 minutes to decide who's going to win the national title. They ended up picking the other girl, and even everybody on the beach was ready to go down there and cheer Linnea up because the surfing is subjective. The judges decided in that day that girl got the score just barely, that she needed to win. She was also the local girl. It was her break, Huntington Beach. And my response basically was, it's not about how many contests you win, but who you are and how you show up along the way. That really defines who a winner is. So although that was extremely painful, like super, super painful, it was like in her hands, because there's nothing but first to her. And really, as a society, as a culture, that's how we are. It's like, you're either national champ or you're not. If you're second, you might as well be 32nd, to her. Really, because you're either the national champ or you aren't. And it was a hard process to go through. And knowing that even when you perform your best, it doesn't necessarily mean, quote, the title. But if you performed your best, which she did, but you didn't get the score because the judges didn't see it, it was more important to me as a parent to say, like, how are you going to show up and how are you going to respond to this? And so there was a lot of growth in that. And so, very similar, we hear it all the time. It's really about the journey, not the result. And at the same time, as a leader, it's our responsibility to hold the vision, to be adaptable, to really understand what level of leadership we're showing up in, and how we want to respond to the challenges that come up along the way. Our time is coming to an end. I want to invite you I want to first of all say thank you for this conversation. And I want to invite you to just share any nuggets of wisdom to anybody who's listening, who might be feeling overwhelmed, who might be overthinking, who might be experiencing doubt or low energy, because I know those are some of the key triggers or factors that a lot of your clients come to you with. what would you say to that person?
When you recognize those, I call them symptoms of that catabolic energy, that overthinking, replaying events in your mind. I just need to scenario play this. If you say that to yourself, or if you catch yourself blaming someone else or just angry about something, just step back in your mind, step back and say, what's really going on here? And just having the awareness that those are emotions that you are experiencing and that you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, and you are in control of that. You get to decide the way you show up. And I would just say, step back, be aware of what's going on. Ask yourself, what's going on here?
And how can somebody who's interested, who really aligned with your message today, how can they find you or work with you?
You can find me at my website. It's ryandmckinney.com, and the D is for Daniel. That helps people remember that it's a D and not one of the other letters it sounds like. So ryandmckinney.com. You can find all kinds of ways to connect with me there. And there's even some free resources for you at my website around some of this information. So
Awesome. And I believe you have a business blind spot blueprint. Is that something that you're
the breakthrough blueprint, yes. So I do
okay?
one for businesses, I do one for career, and I do one for energy breakthrough. So they're very similarly designed courses, but with a different focus for each one, and designed to support professionals in each one of those areas. And it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for creating the space for people to come together to learn and grow and connect. I really appreciate having you on the show.
Yeah, well, thank you for letting me be on the show. I appreciate it.
All right. Aloha. Have a great day.
All right, bye.